And so in this video, we're going to find out about the history of Pilgrim Psych Center, how it relates to the history of New York and Long Island City at large. And we're going to get into some of the controversies of Pilgrim Psych Center, about some of the things that they don't even mention in their own museum on their grounds to this day. There's periods of times there that they don't like to talk about, and I can understand why. Take a listen to this old news clip about Pilgrim Psych Center, because I think it tells the story really well.
Over a period of 60 years. Among the small anonymous gravestones covered with grass lie many of the lobotomy patients, their final resting place marked only by a number. Lobotomy, an irreversible operation that followed them to the grave. A mysterious word that conjures up images of crude brain surgery.
When you think about the context of the history of the United States, what happened was in the early 1900s, psychology was kind of a new field. It was only started in 1890s that you had started having psychologists. So when you have psychologists, you start having people being like, all right, there's maybe a section of the population who need special help. They need treatment for the public health, for the good of everyone. We need to build institutions where we can house these people. All right, now we have these people. What are we going to do? By 1954, there was 14,000 patients there, and they were doing what was called it was a farm treatment. They were doing farm patient treatment. And if that sounds like a bit of a cult, maybe it was, but they had farm colonies there. The treatment methods was to put all these patients to work. We're going to take these people that don't seem like they really can fit in with society, but we're going to give them a job and a purpose so that they feel as though they're contributing, and they are. They were contributing to standing Long Island up, really, because before Pilgrim Psych Center was put there was no Long Island. And this is interesting because they built their own towns there. They had their own water tower. They had their own church. They had everything. It was like an inclusive, what do you call it, self-sustaining town with the staff there and the patients working on the farms. They weren't getting the results that they wanted. And psychology, you have to understand, is developing as it's like they're laying down the tracks as they're going. They're laying down the tracks and the train is going over it. They're trying to figure out, what is psychology? How can we use it to help people? How can we be valuable with this new field of science? And they were coming up with new thoughts on how to do that today we know it's controversial, it's contested to say the least. So what they started doing with these patients that were in the farm colonies wasn't really working. So they started doing new treatment therapies like electroshock and lobotomies. And this is what they don't put in the museum at Pilgrim Psych Center to this day, because in the 1970s, they started doing lobotomies on patients. There's famous cases there of people they're unable to function as adults anymore after these therapies. They're basically brain dead.
Lobotomy was one of the most controversial surgical procedures in medical history.
His first move is to penetrate directly through the brain from one opening in the skull to the other.
This is historic footage from the National Library of Medicine of an actual lobotomy operation being performed in 1942.
The surgeon then clamps a hemostat.
Lobotomy was an attempt to control violent mental patients by inserting a probe into the brain and blindly moving it about, severing nerve connections in the frontal lobe of the brain, the main area that controls behavior, intelligence, and personality. It was done because, at the time, almost nothing else was available to treat severely disturbed and uncontrollable people who were a physical threat to themselves and others.
Sure, maybe they're not as agitated, they're not dangerous, they're not what people would say is crazy, but these treatment therapies like electroshock have long-lasting consequences that can be debilitating for the patients. So after the 1970s, early 1970s, what happened was psychology evolved again, and they decided, hey, remember what we said about farm colonies, and remember what we said about electroshock? That's actually not a good idea. Just kidding. Don't do that. They do this every couple of years where they change their mind. And now, what's still to this day, since the 1970s, is the prescribed treatment. The new school method of psychology is drugs. And all of these new pharmaceuticals allowed patients to be discharged. It actually worked in the sense that it got the results that they were looking for. Patients were able to fit in with society again without being a problem. So that's the reason why Pilgrim Psych Center saw a ton of discharges, and then it just became this thing that has fallen apart. And now to this day, if you go there, the buildings are all dilapidated, they're all shut down. There's no longer, there's beds, there's rooms for 14,000, but all those buildings are shut down now. And that is all thanks to these new pharmaceuticals and drugs that let the patients be released finally. That's the story of Pilgrim Psych Center. A lot of people are told that the government stopped funding them or Reagan shut them out and now they're not able to have the treatment that they need. That's not what happened. What happened was technology evolved, our understanding of psychology evolved, and we were able to prescribe treatments, different medications, different antidepressants that would make these otherwise unreachable people able to be a part of today's society, able to fit in and function. And we could have that conversation. We could say, well, what's the next evolution of psychology? Is there going to be another new understanding where they decide, actually, hey, remember when we said that we should give you all those pharmaceuticals and all those drugs to treat your mental health? Actually, we were wrong. Just kidding. It's actually this new thing now. And that's what's happened. Farm colonies, lobotomies, prescriptions. Without Pilgrim Psych Center, you don't get to colonize, or you don't get to populate Long Island as quickly. It was a reason to give people a job to go out there. It was a reason for people to populate parts of Long Island that would otherwise have just been farmland. You got to understand, this was a massive facility. 14,000 patients, the biggest in the world, and 4,000 staff members whose livelihoods depended on Pilgrim State Hospital. You know, it had its own power plant, its own pig farm, its own cemetery. The hospital just grew and grew. Between 1931, when it opened up, and 1954, it was just growing and growing. And that's partly because of World War II. You have all these soldiers coming back from World War II, and obviously they have a new kind of mental health problem that people had never historically ever really ever really taken a look at. And that's what they called shell shock at the time, what we call PTSD today. So what ended up happening is you have Suffolk Community College ends up taking over the space there. Today you can go there and it's the Brentwood State Park, the athletic field complex over there. Today a lot of that land is being used for other things, and they've demolished a lot of those buildings. In I believe the 80s, they ended up doing controlled demo on a lot of Pilgrim State Park or Pilgrim Psych Center Hospital. It has always stuck out as a landmark, and if you look, and if you're from Long Island, you know that there's all these stories and old ghost tales about the place, and kids, it's kind of a rite of passage. They always go there and they want to break into the buildings there, or they want to see what's going on at Pilgrim Psych Center. That's everyone. When you're 18 years old or you're in high school in Long Island, one of the things you do is you drive down to Pilgrim Psych Center and you see the buildings, and it's just something that attracts people, and it attracts a lot. People from all over the world have come to see this building and understand its history and how its history within psychology. But this is all related to Long Island's history. It's just something that fascinates me. And so I took a trip from Queens, Astoria, where I live. I went down to Pilgrim Psych Center and I checked it out. I wanted to see what is it like there today. Very heavily guarded. There's a lot of security roaming the grounds. So if you go there, you're not going to be able to really break into anything, because they got police doing roaming patrols throughout Pilgrim Psych Center today, looking for people that are trying to urban explore. Those hipsters down there trying to urban explore throughout Pilgrim Psych Center. So thank you for watching. If you like this video on Long Island history, let me know. I do rundowns like this all the time, so if you liked it, please hit the like button because that helps to promote the videos and my content across YouTube. And please remember to subscribe so we can see each other again.